Namaskaram, everybody. A very warm welcome to the 8th episode of Sangati. While I'm waiting for everyone to join in, I would just like to take the time to say a few words about Sangati for those of you who are joining in for the first time. This is a very humble endeavor to meaningfully engage during this lockdown time that we're all in. To sort of look beyond just practicing and performing as artists and to delve deeper into allied aspects of dance. And in this regard, I've been very fortunate to be associated with some really brilliant scholars, artists, nutritionists and physiotherapists, and I mean just everyone who's been a part of Sangati has been such an ocean of knowledge. And I'm just very fortunate to be doing this for you all. This is the 8th episode, and we are having with us today Srimati Divya Devaguptapu, a renowned Bharatanatyam dancer from San Diego and Chennai. She is a disciple of the Dhananjayans, so about Divya Akka, if I have to go back to where we began, I watched her for the first time on stage in Bangalore, possibly I think 10 years ago or maybe 8 years ago, and I was in awe of the performance that I watched. She presented a piece called Kunti Vilapam, which is still so vivid in my eyes. And thereafter, I followed Divya Akka's journey, and I've really admired her thought process, intelligent thought process to choreography, a very research-driven approach, codified approach to how she looks at choreography and Abhinaya, of course. And I mean, she traverses in a very intellectual space, but is sort of also able to bring that out on stage in her performances, and that's what I've really adored her for. And when I reached out to her, asking her if she would be able to share a few words with us at Sangati, she very readily agreed, and I'm so grateful that she's with us today. So to join the video. Namaskaram. Welcome to the 8th episode of Sangati. So grateful that you are doing this for all of us. And can someone in the audience just tell us if you can hear both of us? Then we can switch off comments and start the show. Akka, you want to say a few
words? Yes. Thank you, Divya, so much for having me as part of Sangati. Like I mentioned to you over the phone, I think you've very thoughtfully, very intelligently curated it, and your approach to dance comes through in the way you are envisioning Sangati for yourself and for everybody's benefit. So thank you for doing this, and I think this is definitely a very, very meaningful endeavor, not just for dancers, but for everybody who just wants to pursue this journey of art, whatever art it may be. So yes, so thank you, and I'm very happy to be on this episode and share my thoughts. Yeah, I don't know if everyone can hear, but...
I think everyone heard. They've said that they're able to hear. So I'm turning off the comments while we get started.
Okay.
So I have a lot of questions for you today. So, you know, I think we'll just get right into the crux of what we're going to be speaking about. And today you've very gracefully agreed to share with us your perception of Sahitya, the literal, metaphorical and the mystical. So, you know, from a general understanding, I think Sahitya refers to prose, poetry, songs. So that could be Padya, Kavya, Gita. But I'm sure we are missing the bigger connotation to what Sahitya really is. So what to you is Sahitya? And maybe you could just start with telling us about that.
Yeah. As a dancer, I think we all agree that you know, dance is not just an isolated art form. It's a composite art form of so many things coming together. So as a dancer, when I view Sahitya, I can't view Sahitya in isolation. And then this one verse in Sanskrit keeps coming back to me all the time. It says, Sangeetamapi Sahityam Dvayam Saraswatyaha Stanadvayam. Together. So Sangeetamapi Sahityam Saraswatyaha Stanadvayam. So when we say Stanadvayam, her two breasts are like the Sangeetam and Sahitya. And she is Vak Devi, like the Devi of speech. So when speech or music, whatever it is, both Sahitya and Sangeetam together come to form the nectar of her milk, which we all receive. So for me, that one verse is always in my mind whenever I think of Sahitya. And again, when we say Sangeetam, so you see the verse doesn't say Geetam and Sahityam. It says Sangeetam and Sahityam. And Sangeetam again is Geetam, Vadyam, Tatha Nrityam, Trayam Sangeetam Uchyache. So all three come. So everything, so Geetam comes in it, Vadyam comes in it, Nrityam comes in it, Sahityam comes in it. So when I as a dancer view Sahityam, for me all these elements come together to form the prose. Of course, if we look at Sahityam in isolation, if it's just the prose or just the literature, obviously it has its own poetic beauty. It has its own grammar. It's a language of its own, just like Natyam is a language or, Geetam is a language. Everything has its own language. But as a dancer, I can't seem to view it in isolation. Yeah, for me, it all just comes together as like one big, I wouldn't say it's not a khichdi, but it's one beautiful sort of coming together of every element in its right proportion.
So
Yeah, yeah,
so
yeah, yeah.
so beautifully put about what Sahitya is to you. And I think it's I love the comparison, of Sahityam and Sangeetam together, at that they are to be of equal proportion as well.
Yeah.
So the first thing that many of us dancers do when we read a verse or a poem and decide to start choreographing it is put into Abhinaya, let us say Padartha. That's the first thing that we do. It's like pretty much a literal depiction of the language of the prose or the poem into a Bharatanatyam language. But often we tend to stop at the Padartha level. So, or maybe we can probably, we do Sancharis as well. We kind of elaborate on an episode that kind of links to that verse or line. But I think the process of delving into Abhinaya is a lot deeper than just this. So we all read the article that you just shared about, on Medium about Abhinaya. So maybe we should hear it from you again about what the process of deepening Abhinaya is all about.
Yeah, sure. Okay. So actually for this one, when I think I'm going to start with something very simple. Okay. I'll start with a slight demo and then I'll see, am I clear enough? Is it a little dark or it's okay? It's visible.
It's minorly dark.
Darker, right? Yeah, I know. That's what I thought. But for the most part, you can see my expression?
Yes,
perhaps.
Yes, we can see you. We can see you, yes.
You can turn that on and see. I don't know. It's a little darker than usual for some reason. But anyway, so I guess what I was trying to say is that, so I will first I'll just demonstrate the two, okay? So first, Padartham, when we take something very simple, okay? Something we've all been doing since perhaps the first day of dance class or second day of dance class, whenever. And we look at it in two ways. I'll do it in two ways. And then we'll understand really, and then I think then that whole article will sort of come through automatically. Yeah. Right. So let me start with, so the verse that I'm thinking of doing is just Angikam Bhuvanam. Okay. We all know that, the very first shloka in Abhinaya Darpanam. So if I was just going to do like how we teach like a 5-year-old perhaps or a 6-year-old. So Angikam Bhuvanam Yasya Vachikam Sarvavangmayam Aharyam Chandra Taradi Tam Numa Satvikam Shivam. So this is version 1. So we'll keep this as version 1.
Appa, would you mind going a slightly behind, because I think when you're
yeah. Okay, I'll step back. I'll probably move this away. So for this second version, what I'm going to do is actually I will dance. We'll see. I guess it'll come through. Hopefully it'll come through. We'll find out. Can you still hear the? I'm going to just play some music, so hopefully you can still hear. You can hear. this is you visible. I hope you're able to hear that.
Yeah, so beautiful. So vividly, you've painted the whole. I'll let you speak about it. I'm sure you won't.
No, go ahead. That's okay. I guess that was the idea. The idea was to say we have a simple verse, Angikam Bhuvanam, that it at 5, when we are 10 years old, perhaps, what it means to us versus when we grow with it, what it becomes. Right? So when we say Angikam Bhuvanam Yasya Vachikam, I mean, it's very simple. We say his body is the universe. His speech is the entire language. Aharyam, his ornaments, Chandra, Taradi, everything. And to him, to that Satvikam Shivam, I bow. But when we say his Angikam is Bhuvan, is the universe, like, to me, that is the most profound thing. I mean, it's just the whole universe is that one Shiva energy that we're talking about ultimately, right? And that, how do I show the profundity of it without just making it that Bhuvanam? Yeah, there is Bhuvanam in my eyes, but so much is there in that Angikam. He doesn't have an Adi, he doesn't have an Antam, he is Anantam. He doesn't have a beginning, he doesn't have an end, he is beyond. You look for him in Patalam, Vishnu himself looked for him, Brahma looked for him, he couldn't find him. And he is that ball of fire that extends along the universe. So for me, that is universe. All of it coming together becomes the universe. Then his Aharyam. Every time I think of his Aharyam being Chandra's, Suryan, Chandra, Taradi, everything, it's like, I feel like, if we take a spaceship and go to, I don't know, outer space and cosmos, and just look at the cosmos, right, from there,
right.
And you see all the stars, the moon, everything, that is his Aharyam, that adorns him. So it's such a profound statement. So for me, so when we start approaching Sahitya like that, when we start looking at every layer that the Sahityam has, so there is a literal layer, then there is a next layer where, again, there was a metaphor here, there is a metaphysical also here, right? So the metaphor is that he, like for instance, I showed, we couldn't see his, Brahma looks for him, Vishnu looks for him, but they can't find his up and down. And then the metaphysical is that he's everything. He is this energy that is even running this universe. So the beautiful, like there's so many layers that you can take and sort of extrapolate and approach the same simple thing. You can make it as simple as you want or as profound as you want. It just depends on how much you feel for it. And then where does your interpretation of a lived emotion come here? I think that's what my article was saying, was also how much you feel. Like for me, I keep thinking how, like, if we step out and look, and nowadays we have so much time, right? We go to the terrace and look at the stars and the sky. Exactly. There is and just the profundity of this universe that we live in. So each time you allow that experience to fill you and you take that experience back into your dance, then your dance gets filled with that lived experience of your thought. So for me, that is how I like to approach it. So Aharyam Chandratari Tamnuma Satvikam Shiva. Then the other beautiful thing, how beautifully this simple shloka ties into our topic today, which is Abhinayam. We have 4 types of Abhinayam. Angika Abhinayam, Vachika Abhinayam, Aharya Abhinayam, Satvika Abhinayam. I know, I feel like I tear every time I think of this. It's so beautiful. Entire Shiva comes in this. His essence comes in in everything. And Abhinayam then becomes what? Just his expression of just being, right? And that is what the shloka is saying. Angikam Bhuvan, Vachikam Sat, Aharyam Chandra, Satvikam Shiva. So the ultimate sattva that we get through our expression is an inner expression and inner joy. That is what becomes then Satvikam Shiva. So I thought this verse suddenly from, just one verse that we say in dance class and feel very sweet and happy about, suddenly becomes the entire universe, the entire existence that we are living in. So I think that is how you want to start, at least that's how I think I love to approach Abhinayam and Sahityam. Just from that Padartham level, keep every word, like every word can have so many meanings if you look for it, if you want to understand it truly, right? So that's why we can just leave Angikam, right? The version 1 that I did, or, just make it this big if needed.
And I think as you rightly pointed out, it's also a sum of the experiences that kind of make it that profound. Because when you're taught, when you learn it as a 5 or 10-year-old, say, and then over time, how you sort of, with the experiences, with just filling yourself with things from around you, from surroundings, and then it grows into you and then manifests as something else with time. And and I'm sure you yourself feel that 10 years ago when you did this shloka is probably not the same as it is today, and
not at all.
10 years later it'll probably be something else. So it was beautiful that you pointed out about experiences and how they really define what Abhinaya pans out to be.
Yeah,
So,
and that's what in that. Sorry, yeah, go ahead, go ahead. No, yeah, and that's what I mentioned in that article. I think what I was trying to say is there's something we call chitta vritti, the lived emotion, every lived emotion. So we are able to recognize an emotion in another because we have lived it, whatever it may be. Okay, it may be the nastiest of emotion, or it may be the most beautiful emotion. We have it all inside us. So if we are able to recognize it in another's performance or in another, just even being, we know it ourselves. We have to tap into it and understand it. And then it becomes our lived emotion. So whatever you want to play, whatever character you want to play ultimately, right? Yeah. So that is the other, there is an experiential part where you experience the nature, the world around you, and your art gets influenced by that. And there is an inner experience which your art is constantly guided by, and that is that chitta vritti that I think I mentioned that also in that article. So I just wanted to explain that. Yeah.
So beautiful. So and yeah, okay. So coming to the crux of of today's discussion, which is about Sahitya and its layers. And I think in the very first shloka itself, you so beautifully demonstrated how it can be just literal. I mean, literal itself is so beautiful, and I think
it's so beautiful. Exactly. Yes.
It's not to undermine literal, but then how artistically you play with it, and then go to the next level, and then go beyond that, which is the mystical level. So maybe you could probably give us some examples and help us understand what is literal, what is metaphorical, what is mystical, and how you have in your journey played with Sahitya to kind of explore these aspects. And probably then, we can learn from you about how we can start, our journey of playing with Sahitya.
Yeah, sure. I will restrict it to just some of the work I have done. I've taken a few examples that sort of cover, the whole gamut of what we're trying to discuss. Sure. So we'll start. For me, I guess what happens is one of the most important factors that guides the choices that I make in terms of how I want to approach a lyric is ultimately the Satvik Abhinayam that I want to convey or I want to experience for myself, right? So unless I am going to feel it so deeply inside, whatever it may be, I don't want to actually do it or show it out. So a lot of the choices I make are very personal choices. They, it's not that I'm, sticking to one aspect only, but every lyric sort of already opens out to you choices. It says, hey, you can choose this, you can choose that, you can choose this, and then you pick and choose what works for you the best. Right. So what we'll do is perhaps we'll look at some of the, I would say, most important compositions that we use in Bharatanatyam, where Satvika Abhinayam is predominant. Okay, so I would say Satvika Abhinayam is mostly exemplified in Padams and Javalis, and also, of course, in Padavarnams. Now, let me start first. Maybe we'll start with Varnam because that is something most people already know. I think Padams is a harder genre to understand right away off the bat, and so I will go to that next. So I'll start maybe first with Padam. So in Padavarnams, we have many different categories, right? We have there's so many different kinds. Of course, there's only a few in circulation. Hopefully, there will be more. But the ones that we have
to add there that your mother's book on Varnam is a treasure for dancers.
Yeah, thank you.
Actually, start looking at more compositions. So, sorry to interrupt you.
No, absolutely true. I mean, like that is just tireless, thankless work she's done. Just for everyone. Yeah, so it's an amazing book. I agree. So broadly, we somewhat classify Varnams, as dancers into like Bhakti Varnams or Shringara Varnams or Shringara Madhura Bhakti Shringara Varnams. So I'll take one, maybe I'll first start with, let's just start with an example from my mother's book itself, maybe because that I think a lot of people do have that, then they can go back and refer to it perhaps easily. So that is a Varnam that was written in the 17th century, the Varnam that I'm going to talk about. It's the Natukuranji Atatala Varnam. Okay. So now when you approach a Varnam, especially when it is a Shringara type Varnam, you don't want to just, just take the lyric for what it is and then just go through it and be like, okay, great. she's pining in this line, next line she becomes something else and something else happens. They're not disjoint. As much as, our jatis and our swaras and everything disjoin them, the text is not disjoint. It is definitely, there is a thought flow, there is a thought process, which even if you feel like you don't understand the composers, at least I feel like I want to make my own thought flow and thought process through the whole thing. And understand first sort of the emotional state of the Nayika. What is exactly that she's feeling through the course of this entire Varna? And that you can understand only by reading the text over and over again. You'll have to read it 20 times, 30 times, 40 times, however many times, to get a sort of a character sketch of who she is, what does she do, what is she even talking about in this space. And this is Sringara Varnams. I'll come to Bhakti next. Okay, so this is just something where, it's more about human relationships more than anything else. So in this context, now suppose we take Inta Aluka Jesite. Okay, so the first line itself, the Varnam says, Inta Aluka Jesite Yetula Taludura. So she says, Inta, that means this much. Aluka, that word there is key. Inta aluka is loosely, if I translate in English, it is anger. Okay. But is it Inta aluka, like Raudram, Jesite, yet how do I manage? So the Nayika is talking directly to Venugopal. And she says, if you do this, if you show this much anger to me, how do I manage? But is it anger? No, it is not anger. So that's when you have to understand the subtlety of the language that comes into play up there. So what is aluka over there? Aluka is actually just a misplaced anger. It's that lover's stiff anger. She's like, "Poda, na, I won't talk to you. You go that side." So you want to really understand the context. So that word itself gives you the entire context of the Varnam. The fact that the whole Varnam is just about something very misplaced. The whole conversation that she's doing for 30 minutes going forward is just, this guy putting up his price and she, trying to woo him back and be like, oh, come on, don't be so. Right. And so how do you approach that? You can either, so a lot of metaphors can be used, which when we say, this much, this kind of anger, I have, unnecessary, Kavam you're showing to me, I come to you, you push me away, you don't even, perhaps make, maybe you would buy flowers for me every day, you didn't buy that for me today, like what is happening, things like that, anything you can show over there. So those are choices you want to make about how you want to interpret each line. But I will go to the Anupallavi because the Anupallavi is very beautiful. Because Aluka, we've already probably learned, we already learned how to interpret in many different ways. That's a pretty standard approach to how to interpret. I want to go to the next line, which is somewhat a little not too standard in approach, but so in the Anupallavi, she says, Vinta Jesi Chakkani Venugopal. Again, the key word there is Vinta. So Vinta means what in Telugu? Vinta is, I have a Telugu advantage because I speak Telugu. So that's why you'll see everything I talk about will be Telugu. But Vinta here is strange. She's like, oh, it's very strange, this behavior. You're normally not this. You don't get upset. You don't get, we don't have fights like this. This doesn't happen. Oh, did you get up on the wrong side of the bed? Or perhaps did the sun rise on the other side today? So many things. Like daily things that you can put back into that Vinta Jesi. Very, or maybe, you normally make coffee for me every morning. Iniki coffee kuda varla. Like what is happening? Right? It could be however you want to interpret it. That's fine. But again, you want to look at it in the overall context of, I have 30 minutes. Okay. So in these 30 minutes, typically these days, what Kacheri itself has come down to 60 minutes, which is like torture in my opinion. I cannot keep it at 60. It's so hard. But anyway, so since the time is coming down, we don't have the luxury of so much interpretation. So I like to have certain just very key sort of grasping points, where I can soak myself in and I can immerse myself in something. So for me, that Vinta Jesi was a beautiful opportunity to create that whole scene actually, where they're fighting in this misplaced, with this unnecessary tiff that is happening. She's trying to woo him. She's like, I will, whatever. Maybe I can demonstrate that so it makes sense. Yeah. So that is so, and musically too, for me, because this is an Atatala Varnam, to repeat one line One line almost takes a minute. Exactly. So it's like, so you have to make those choices. Do I want to do multiple interpretations of the same line, or can I do one thing that sort of fits in and, you know, still conveys the whole meaning in an effective way, right? And gives me the freedom to explore. So I chose to explore that as a little Neravel over there. So you can call it a Sanchari Bhava, but it is Sanchari Bhavan within the context. It is not necessarily Sanchari Bhavan, I would think, but it is in the context of just them both fighting over there. So maybe if I...
Vinta, it's for the
yes,
of the word.
In context of the word Vinta, and also that Aluka that we already established in the beginning. That the fact that he's just angry with her for no reason. Okay, he's just like putting up his price. So it is in both these contexts that you want to, and plus when you read the rest of the Varna, more importantly, so even to make this choice, when you read the rest of the Varna, especially the Charanam, okay, the Charana Sahitya says, Ni Sariga Matada Jesina Nape. So when you say, so she says, Ni Sariga means Ni Samana. Unnoda Samanama, I am. I am equal to you. So this is written in that way. Okay, so like I think it's beautiful, like for a 17th century poem to read.
Absolutely.
You know, with the woman saying, I am equal to you. Yes,
exactly,
and you will come to empowerment in a bit, but yeah. But true, exactly. So there was no question of her saying, you know, I am like, you know, completely gone without you, none of that stuff. She says, I am equal to you in all aspects. Okay, I can sing as well, I can dance as well, I'm equally erudite, which she was. All these dancers were, all the Devadasis were in those times. So to even so the way she's going to fight then with him, or the way she's going to, you know, want to patch up with him, or is, you know, there is a slight, she knows the power of her womanhood at that point. And that we all do as women. We know we can, I think at some point, you know, we manipulate. I'm talking about this little emotional manipulation, you know. We are like, we're charming enough, we can get the guy to, you know, melt at some point. So I think so. That's what's so beautiful about compositions like this, you know. They give you these varied layers that you don't, you know, you can just play with. It's just how you want to interpret it, how you want to understand
it. But I think it's also, you know, that understanding of the word aluka that has sort of brought you to, you know, weave it this way. Whereas if it was just a straightforward anger and not this misplaced anger, if for someone who doesn't know the nuances of Telugu, or is, you know, has not consulted with a scholar and just thinks of it as just anger, the entire Varnam will pan out so differently as opposed to this. So it's so important to get that, I think, contextual placement of these words as well. Right?
Yes, absolutely. Especially in Telugu, you will see like, and since most people, you know, most of our compositions are in Telugu, and we don't know Telugu. A lot of us don't. I mean, let me put myself aside, but most people who attempt them are not the native Telugu speakers. So those subtlety, you know, the subtlety of the Telugu language, I'm sure if you know, told me something in Tamil, I cannot relate to it as well as I would in Telugu, even though, you know, I grew up in Chennai. For me, Telugu is still the language you speak at home. That just kind of comes into. So those subtle, yes, you're absolutely right. Unless you understand those subtle things, and that's why it's very important to go talk to people. Thankfully, you know, I am so lucky that it's my mother and I can just talk to her. Yeah, but she herself, you know, it's like sometimes we'll call 2-3 other scholars too to make sure, you know, we're thinking the right way and we're really approaching it the right way, to make just double check sometimes, you know. So, but you're right. So those key words are the words you want to look for, and then sort of frame everything else around it. Yeah. So then that determines your sthai for it. So the sthai here is a very strong woman who knows what she wants. Okay, and she knows that this anger is misplaced. It's going to go away. And she knows she can woo him back, no problem. And that is what I mean by she knows the power of her womanhood. She knows what she has, and she knows she's not supplicating to him, but she's pretending like she's supplicating. She keeps going and coming. And then there is this, and then when the seduction happens, it's a very playful seduction. it's not like, all those kind of too many, none of that. It's very playful. It's so playful because there's underlying it all, there is love. Whatever said.
True.
And that love and respect, even though she says, I am equal to you, all that stuff, underlying all of that, there is that love and respect that they share for each other. So from that base, you want to start sort of building and understanding the layers that are involved in this Nayika. So we can, maybe, should I show this one Sanchari Kuti? Yeah, okay.
Yes.
And is the volume audible? Is it, I just, yeah.
Perfect. Yes.
Okay, all right, let me then. So,
Fantastic, fantastic.
okay.
And I
So,
I want to just say before you say, I loved the way you use the Venugopala bit to kind of, play with that. When
the
she's
flute,
singing, she
yeah.
wants him to play the flute, he's not playing and she's angry. When she's dancing, she wants him to play the flute, he's not playing and she's angry. That's so beautifully played for the word Venugopala. So
Yeah,
evident. I mean, it's so evidently there, and it's so
exactly.
intelligently done. Yeah,
Yeah, so
yeah.
those are the things. So that's why I keep saying the composition itself gives you all these like thousands of ideas. Like it's there, it's all there in it. Like you just have to pick and choose what you want to use. So even in that Vedu Gopala, so first she says, that she's trying to make something like this, let's say,
Right,
the
right,
ring that
right,
goes around that.
right.
But he is like so angry. He's like, what, I'm taking it, I'm tossing here. See, the beads have all fallen, go. So, the way you want to just play with and it's a lover's thing, it's like how it can look silly. It's fine because that's the whole point of this fight.
That's the
It's
whole
not,
point.
yeah, because the fight is really not, it's nothing very substantial here. So it's like both are being silly in their own way. She's like, okay, come play, I will sing, you dance. None of that is happening. So
And
things
that's
like
exactly the emotion you evoked as well. Now, when we see, two of our friends, husband and wife, quarreling, and you're like,
Yeah.
"Are you fighting? That's
Yeah.
exactly kind of what it just evokes that sense of, okay, that little laughter in
Yeah.
those watching you as well, because it's so. I mean, as you said, even if it's silly, it's
It,
supposed to
yes.
look that way.
Exactly. And those are the things. So you want to play on those things to eventually, and that is rasanubhavam, as that is the rasa that the audience or you yourself, will be experiencing because that is what you're even showing. But then you see, it's so nuanced, it's so subtle. And so much of it, again, we take from our own life. I'm sure, I fight with my husband. I'm sure I think we all do. so it's like, Po, I'm not going to do this. Oh, you go. Oh, you didn't do this. You didn't do the dishes. The same standard kachmach that happens with all of us.
Correct.
So you pull from all of that and you kind of make up, but keep it in the context of this whole Venugopala or whatever the context may be, without sort of losing the overall ethos of the Varnam. Yeah. So that is one way of doing it. I like to go so when I say I like to go the Neraval route or the route where I can expand on, because I feel more than the multiple interpretations which are beautiful. I love that. I do that many times, maybe in the Pallavi, in the Charanam, of the same line, like the same line, Hintaluka. We can do it in so many different ways.
Yeah.
Yes, but some things like this, which are very human, they immediately, like this becomes then the point that you sort of get absorbed into, because it has that much time. It's giving you the space of time, music, rhythm, everything, where you can actually sink in and bring that whole sort of story alive. So I like these narrative points, and you'll see those through most of what I do. So, when we suppose we take a Bhakti Varnam, for instance. Okay, so this Varnam next again is a very beautiful Varnam of Maharaja Swati Tirunal. Okay, so in this, so it's in Saveri Ragam, and the Sahityam goes Saveriha Tanuja. Okay, so the first time I read the Saveriha Tanuja Santatam Mamavatu. The book says, Devi, to you I, bow down and protect me always. But why Saveri? What is Saveri? How did Saveri come? And how, yes, it is the Ragam, but I've never heard, at least my limited knowledge, I have never heard, Devi being referred to this way for, in that context. We hear Bhairavi a lot, we hear, but Saveri, I was like, okay, what? So, that thing completely stumbled me. I was like, oh, okay, fine. I went through whole thing and I was like, oh, beautiful, very profound Varna. Okay, very profound in its sahityam. So then when you talk to scholars, like you said, when you talk to Sanskritam scholars and you start breaking it down, the word Saveri, of course, is such an intelligent play on Sa, Ave, Iha, Saveri. When the two sandhis happen at two levels. So she, the one of the mountain, Iha, Saveri. Sa, Ave, Avi is also mountain. Ave becomes one from the mountain. Iha, Saveri, Ha, Tanuja.
So
Daughter of the mountain.
of the mountain.
So beautiful. So then it suddenly the whole thing is put in context. Okay, so now I know how to even approach the first. Right. So you always want to start understanding. So when you stumble on words like this, instead of simply just doing it, when you sort of really break it down, when you break down the Sanskritam in it or Telugu in it, whatever, it sort of gives you a context that you can actually develop on just like so beautiful. Yeah. So then, of course, it's on Devi, we can show so many hands for it. I want to go to slightly the more metaphysical aspect over here now, because the Varnam calls for it. Okay, so this is entirely my approach. A lot of people have other approaches, but so now then when we go into the Pallavi, for instance, of this Varnam, Anupallavi, it says, Yavara yogi hridayambuja kritavasa. She dwells in the lotus hearts of sages. Okay. Beautiful. Anupallavi is such a big Anupallavi. Yavara yogi hridayambuja kritavasa. So we read a line like that. So what do we do? Okay. There is already a metaphor in the line. Okay. None of our hearts are made of lotus. We all have the same muscle and blood and whatever in our hearts. So why is the heart lotus here? I don't know. That is point number one. So that itself is a metaphor there. In a poetic metaphor, already within the text, right? So, Yavara yogi hridayambuja kritavasa. Then you're like, okay, fine. So, what do we mean by she resides in the lotus hearts of sages? What is lotus here? So, let's take the word lotus out. And then we see lotus is such a commonly used metaphor in our philosophy. Something that rises above all the muck that it is surrounded by. So, nothing is stuck to it. So to become a lotus heart, or to be that person with a lotus heart, what does it mean? It's typically you're a realized soul, or you've found that happiness inside, you found your divinity within you. Okay, it's a very deep concept, extremely deep. So there are two approaches to it. Now, when the text already has so much metaphor in it, right? It already has something so deep. She only resides in the hearts of these lotus sages, is what Swati Tirunal is saying here, right? Or in the lotus hearts of these sages, okay? So that is already a metaphor. So should I use more metaphors and make it more metaphorical? Or do I jump from metaphorical to mystical? The metaphysical layer, right? Because if you take all our texts as examples, every mythological story that we have in our philosophy, they are all metaphors for something much, much larger. No story is just a story. Even, the much debated Mahabharata and Ramayana are deepest metaphors for life. And I think if we understood it in those contexts and read it in those contexts, our life would be very different. We wouldn't have, discussions that dwell on topics because sometimes, so for me, it's always been that. It's like if I see a text, I don't want to take it at face value. I want to know, because obviously the person who's written it, we can't just negate their work. It's not like, I don't know what you've written, sorry, I'm going to just interpret it this way.
Exactly.
Right. So just to try to understand. So now if we have a text like this that is already so metaphorical, and it stands for something much deeper. So let's jump to the next level. What is the next deeper level that it's talking about? So that goes to the mystical or the metaphysical level. And what is that? Then immediately, I read the Lalita Sahasranamam a lot. Immediately that one verse from the Sahasranamam struck me. It says, Antarmukha Samaradhya Bahirmukha Sudurlabha is there in the Sahasranamam if you go read it. Antarmukha Samaradhya, if she is only there, if you look within, if you keep searching for her outside, you will never find her.
So beautiful.
So, and I was like, that's right. So that's all he's saying. When we are saying that he is residing in a heart of a or the lotus heart of a sage, it's that one, the seeker who's finally there inside her. So the metaphysical layer that comes off into this is again, now when I come back and look at the concept of it as such, we are seeking for, you can call it happiness, you can call it divinity, you can call it joy, whatever. But we're all in this external seeking and accumulation mode. I want this, it'll give me happy. I want that, it'll give me happiness. I want something else. And we keep going. And then ultimately, where do we go? Nowhere. Like really, we're stuck right now in our houses. So, despite all our accumulations, right? Yeah. So where do you go? You just, I think, and then you come to a point where you realize that the whole life itself is an inner journey. It's not even an external journey. And when you sort of understand, so for me, doing this Sanchari or doing this or interpreting this line in that way made more sense. It didn't make sense to me to again say, perhaps like a story of some great sage who was her devotee and how she came and protected him, which is the natural route we mostly go. You're right.
Exactly.
Like some great devotee that Devi protected or something like that.
Correct.
For me, I was like, it's already there in the text. I just have to go to the next layer. It was just a very obvious choice. It may not be a relatable choice. Okay, maybe the audience doesn't relate to it. I don't know. But to me, it's very relatable because I want to do something that makes sense to me. Because, in the sense, a lot of times.
It's just about spilling this out to the audience in your program notes, and then they kind of get that layer as well. Maybe.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, true. But it's. I don't know. Perhaps they do, but they don't. So it's anyway. So for me, then again, if I have to say something so metaphysical, okay, something so deeply spiritual, which is really the essence of our lives, how do I say it in a way that my language of Bharatanatyam allows me to say it in the most meaningful, in a visually appealing, not even appealing, sort of understandable way, right? So reading metaphysics, reading spirituality books, we can all read, but that is just an intellectual accumulation. It's like, it's a very loosely, look within. Okay, what does look within even mean? Exactly. Have you looked within? Okay, it's a very loose statement, we make. Yeah. Like I am seeking. Okay, what are you seeking? But unless you sort of make that personal journey, you can't. It's hard. So so things like this will take time to develop. Maybe the first time you dance it may look very shallow. It may, but sort of as your life unfolds and your experiences unfold, doing an elaboration on this particular line will, find more meaning. So I chose, so I'm just talking about the more, so how do we traverse levels? So this was one example I wanted to talk about. I mean, I can show it too. I've edited the music if we need to see it. I don't know how we're doing on time. I think we're out of time, no?
So we have about 6 minutes for this live, but we will definitely start another live because
Ouch, I'm so sorry.
Not at all, because I'm sure the audience agrees that it's a wealth of information that you're giving us, and definitely we will start the next live, and all those who are here, please do continue. We will start the live immediately after this live ends. So Akka, we have 6 minutes for this. So do you think this will be done within 6 minutes, or do you want to just start another live?
I edited to 4 minutes. It's a 4 minute Sanchari. Should I do it off quickly?
Perfect.
Okay.
Yeah, once you do this, yes.
Yeah, you can just stop it then.
Yeah.
Do you want to summarize that, or should I talk about that, that Sanchari again?
Yes, it was. So what I observed was it was so nice how, it's not about looking for external things, and then there's
Right.
you showed all the usual things.
Everything,
academy
yeah,
and money
right.
and jewels
Yeah.
and kids and everything. So it's the material Maya, world of Maya, which is not really it's
Attainable,
not what we're
yeah.
looking for, but there's something inward, inside,
Right.
and that's where we can sort of get that happiness. So that's
Right.
what I saw. And
Yeah.
that so vividly describes the line. Yeah.
Exactly. So that was my thing, I think, and again, it's not something, like I said, you don't read from a book and sort of want to interpret that. I took this from my own life, like how I've done the full route of everything. I mean, I've studied, I have an engineering master's, I have all kinds of, but I don't, but that's not where my happiness lied. For me, dance was the Devi, and dance was where my true joy was,
Right.
where I found. So really, so that's what I mean by when you tie it back to your own lived experiences,
Right.
the color that your Abhinayam gets is very different. Okay, it's very real, it's very true. However much I talk and explain, unless you have felt it and you have lived it. In fact, I even showed, I think, something like even these mindless we go from one temple to another, running around looking for,
right.
I was trying to, I couldn't move much because I think I was out of the camera. So I was like trying to, but so I don't know if that came through, but even that, mindlessly we're like, inge pola, anga pona better, this Tirtha Sthalam is better. I'm not saying it's anything bad, but the fact is, that every time it's just a mindless looking for something. Oh, maybe idu panna, idu panna varum, things like that. So when we are mindfully and sort of going within to try to attain the same thing. So I think, you summarized it beautifully. So that was the approach here. And that is when I like to take, so this was just an example of how I want to take the metaphorical to the more mystical level.
So beautiful.
Yeah. So should I proceed?
Yes.
I was wanting to do a little bit of padams too. I don't know if it's too much time, then we can do.
No, not at all. We'll probably take on the padam as well. So that's the thing, right? I guess there are
Right.
a lot of other things, events happening right now.
I know there's so much.
I know a lot of people will come back to watch this. I know that for sure, and it's such a
Okay.
So maybe we'll take on a padam, and then I'll ask.
Okay, so I had a few examples. Which one you think will make most sense at this point? Let me talk about maybe a choreographic choice at this point instead.
Yeah.
So we spoke about the mystical, the metaphorical somewhat, and then maybe what I'll do is okay. So I had a few. Okay, we'll talk about choreographic choices in padams.
Yeah.
Okay, so how do you make that choice of how you want to elaborate? So for this, I'll take 2 padams. Okay, just to give an example. I don't have to demonstrate it, but I'll just give you an example. So then that way it's easier. We save on time as well. So one, padams, first of all, I want to clarify this statement. A lot of us think, a lot of people, I think, who are uninitiated into Bharatanatyam think anything that is not a varnam and that is a padam. No, padam is a very, very highly nuanced composition, very slow, written by Kshetraya, Sarangapani, Dasu, some very specific composers. So do not mistake a Natana Madinar for a padam. It is not.
Yes.
That is a kirtanam. Okay. No, I've heard this a lot. So I keep like thinking, no.
Right.
So, and
padam, idadu padam tukki adu.
Tuki, it's not a padam. No, it's not. Yeah. So just a quick, like an FYI, just
Right.
in case. So anyway, in padams, what happens is padams exemplify Satvik Abhinayam. I mean, I can talk about padams for like 5 hours, but I won't. I will refrain. But it's like one ocean. You can just go, like, just swim in it. It is so beautiful. Okay, just every line, the way it offers itself for interpretation, the way it offers itself for just finding those subtle, nuanced emotions within your own self. Okay, and just bringing those out. It's beautiful. And padams are not always all about only sensual, I am missing you, you are missing me. There is some missing happening here and there, but that is not the only context of padams. I know a lot of people have it very misplaced. I just want to clarify that if you go read the entire gamut of Kshetraya's work, you'll see he has touched on every aspect of human relationships. Okay, and he loved life. He loved living life. He loved relationships. He loved people. And that is what is reflected in his padams. So it's not always about just, I am missing you, you are missing me, I am crying for you. It's not that. So that one thing I want to also mention, just when younger artists want to attempt padams, look for them. You will find so many. Okay. So here we'll take, I won't do that multiple interpretational thing, because I think that we are already taught. We're taught, we have been, yeah. So now what we'll do is, so I'll take a padam. This is a Kalyani padam, okay? Or should I do that first? Or Cherry, okay, we'll take that padam. It's very beautiful. I like that, so maybe we'll do that. Okay, so in this padam, very beautiful. The Nayika, she's saying, she's missing him, but she's not like dying and, depressed and crying and, none of that stuff. She's missing him. She's just missing his physical presence. But she says, I'm full of you in my heart and I feel you all around me. Okay. He's away and she's a Swiya Divya Nayika. So Swiya is, of course, completely devoted to the relationship. And she's also Divya Nayika in the sense she's a more evolved Nayika. Okay, let's for just a quick description for now. So here she says, Na manasu vantide nee manasaite na nomu phalamiderura. She says, if you feel as much love as I do, you're away on a journey now. But if you feel like the way I feel for you right now, all my austerities towards you, everything that I've done to support you, to be with you, to just everything that I've done for you, all of it has borne fruit. Okay, she says, just the way Vemaru cherakunna pandu pandinatlu vedukulinu madinchera. She says, just the way the sugar cane grows in bountiful, when you come back, our love again on union will just double in joy. And she says, I feel your presence everywhere. I walk up the stairs, I feel you coming right behind me. I'm singing, I feel you singing with me. I have conversations with you. And all of this in a happy way. Okay, she's not like, I'm walking up the stairs and you're not there. None of that stuff. She's very secure in her relationship. And that is very important. So, all of that comes through when you read the Padam. How is this Nayika? How is she feeling? What is her security level like? And what is her relationship like? And then she says, Yavarito vinna vintura ori varada. She says, who else can I share all this but with you? Okay, so for me, and she said, all of these things that I'm thinking, I can't share it with, because I try to go share it with my friends. They just look at me like, okay. And then I share it maybe with, my mother, and she's like, okay, yeah, I understand. Yeah. But, you're the only one who can truly understand what I feel, right? So, and the Padam ends there. Then Namanus, we come back to the Pallavi, everything. So as a choreographic choice, so for me, I wanted to make this sort of as, when she's saying, okay, who else do I say all this but to, or who would tell all this but with you? She's talking to him. Is she talking to him in her mind? Of course she is, because she's saying, I'm having conversations with you, all of this stuff. But how do I show that? So I made the whole Padam a letter that she's writing to him.
Oh, so beautiful. Huh.
So the whole Padam is just a letter that she's writing, stanza by stanza. I feel this, I feel that. And as she is writing, her thoughts keep coming out. And, so you pick lines that help you create a sort of imagery around the Padam. And it situates and contextualizes your Padam in a way that it comes through. Right? And once you create that situation, inside you can give little interpretations. However, all my austerities, whatever austerities she's done, I have prayed for you, or, I've stood by you like a rock behind every time you've gone. I've been that woman who's just there for you always. And so those are,
to him, as you said, it's not something that she can share with her mother or sister or
whoever. Right.
But it's something that, you can assume she's probably going to post the letter, or she's going to keep it for him when he comes back to give it to him.
Right,
So
exactly.
Addressing to him as well.
Yes, she's addressed it to him. Yes.
Which takes off from that line that you said, that who else will I say it to but
to you. Nice. Yes. So, but I end it saying I will not post it. I will not send it to you. Because again, tying it back to the first line, all my austerities towards you have borne fruit. So for her, austerity also means stepping back, allowing him to just be and do. Maybe he's gone on a very important business meeting, or he's gone on something. So she's like, I don't want him to feel like I'm missing him and I'm crying or any of that. I will just hold it, because that is where my strength of austerity for your being is. So you see, so you want to sort of think of it in these kind of contexts and tie it back. So I like to call them, these kind of choreographic choices like recurring motifs, which recur every time. But, and there is a power of repetition. Sometimes when you come back, so the audience keeps coming back with you, and your thoughts also keep coming back, going into that space. Yeah. So choices like this. So then what happens is, even a Padam, so this Padam written in the 17th century or 8th, this is a Kshetra, debated between Kshetra and Annamacharya, this Padam. But let's definitely not beyond 17th century, okay? So it's that old. How do you situate it to a 21st century? And that is where relevance comes in. So, I'm tying it back again to that article that I'm talking about. Right. How are we situating it?
Question also. So you are
right.
Question.
So yes, so we come back to that exactly. So how are we situating it? So I'm not messing with the ethos of the Padam at all. Right. Everything still stays. Mova Gopala stays as he is. The Padam stays as he is. The emotion, but that love and that feeling of human emotion is eternal, and that's my point. So there is no question of relevance here. It's just how do you situate it? If I were a Devadasi and I could do this Padam for like an hour, with musicologists sitting in front of me and understanding every nuance, wow, I would do it in a very different way. But I am a 21st century woman. I was not raised as a Devadasi. Right. I was raised in, all of this, whatever, right. that we're all raised. Yeah. So it is only from my life experience that I can draw and put back into this. So
Absolutely. So beautiful.
yeah, so those are some of the choices, and should I give one more example or should we stop here? No, one more. Okay, all right. So then, so we'll go to this one. Again, these are choreographic choices I'm talking about right now. Okay. So next one, there is a very beautiful, it's a javali, but it's a very slow javali. It goes more like a padam. In Kannada, you must have heard Charumati Upacharamulletike. I don't know if you've heard, but a beautiful javali. So it says, so she's telling, so this is a younger Naika. This is not a very nuanced human relationship. That is what Kshetriya is famous for, but not this particular javali. So this one, she's very simple. Okay, she's a very young girl. All she's telling her friend Charumati, she's like, why all these upachara? Upachara mulu means, all these things that you're doing for me, you're dressing me up, you're making me look pretty, eyebrows like he's not here. So I don't even feel the need for all of this. So he's away on a journey again somewhere, and then so she says, and she's suffering. This is the typical suffering, longing Naika, finding Naika that we see. But again, the reason I bring this up is because I don't want us to say, oh, she's crying, she's suffering, the same old Naika. I don't want to do this. How can you do it in a way that works for you today?
Right.
You make intelligent choices, and that I guess that is why I'm trying to bring this here. So she says, so if you read the padam, okay, sorry, javali, says, what is the second line? Sarasudu chudani abharanamuletike. So she says, if Sarasudu or if my lover does not see all of this, abharana, then what is the point of all of this? Why am I dressed up so beautifully, so well? I don't want any of this if he's not there. And, I've even heard that in a Hindi movie. I'm sure, I don't know if it's your generation or my generation, but this Juhi Chawla song, where she says that Ghungat ki aad se dil, jab tak na pade aashik ki nazar, shingar adhura rehta hai. Yeah, it just struck me. I don't know if you heard it, but
no, I think
it's there. Yeah. It's before your time, perhaps my time, maybe. Yeah. Anyway, so, but anyway, just sound. But to that effect. So she says, if he doesn't see, what is the point of all these abharanas? And then now that abharanamu, I was thinking about it. I'm like, yeah, we're dressing for somebody, we're doing this for him, he's not coming. What can I do with this abharanam? Okay, and this abharanam is what, again ties back to the upacharamu that the friend is doing. The friend is dressing her and keeping her and everything. And she's saying, no, but I don't want to get ready. This is all stupid. I don't want it. So I thought that abharanam again could be a motive that we could use. So she looks at that abharanam, let's say maybe it's a bangle or a earring, whatever you want. And then this is a quick flashback during that charanam. We went there to the fair that day, we bought it together. And it brings back some very fond memories of both of us having, bought this thing together. And she's probably sitting and thinking. She finishes the whole padam, the rest of the line, say similar things. He hasn't come, can you bring him? I don't know what to do. And she's pining, pretty much the usual things. Mm-hmm. But then in the end, how do we want to end this, right? So she looks at that abharanam. So she's sitting with it. And I'm like, I was thinking, why don't I just keep it open? So every day based on how I feel, as a woman, I can end it the way I want.
You can,
So maybe one day I look at that abharanam and that bangle perhaps and say, you know what? I just don't want this guy anymore in my life. I'm done with him. So then abharanam becomes the metaphor here. So do you see? So that bangle, she just says, I'm done with him. I'm done with his waiting for him. I'm done dressing for him. I take off the bangle and I leave. Or I can say, maybe one day where I feel more vulnerable as a person maybe. So what do I mean by that? As in, I don't want to let go of him. Okay. I'm going to sit in hope because somewhere I'm like, no, I don't want him. I don't want to lose him. So she perhaps thinks, maybe should I take him out? Should I not take him out? She goes through that whole juggle.
Dilemma.
In the end, dilemma, rather. And then she says, no, I'll keep him. I think he'll come.
Beautiful.
You can end it one day that way.
Right.
Maybe a third day where you feel, okay, you know what? I've matured. I've gone past him. She's not going to angrily throw it and go. I've matured. I think, we're done. We had our time. We had our relationship. It's over. Maybe she just gracefully puts it in a box and keeps it and says, that was my past. This is my present.
Beautiful.
And I move on.
So beautiful. Yeah.
Right. And then maybe a fourth day. I don't know. She keeps struggling. That's what I'm saying. The thoughts are endless, So you can, when you leave those open endings, for me, I love open endings because then it keeps me present on stage. It's like, in that moment, what is it that's coming to me? How do I feel? Do I want to wait for this guy or not? Right? Yeah. So those open moments just magic, and it transforms because nobody knows what's happening at that moment.
What you're going to do. Even you don't know.
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. It's like, really, I don't know. And it's so powerful because then you announce the padam, but then you do the padam the way it works for you. So again, these are choreographic choices, and the ideas are endless. You can think of so many. I just said bangle and box and whatever. You can think of whatever it is that works for you. So
and that's lovely because I think it keeps us also, on our toes. At least so far, I'm the kind that will always want to have things set and have, be sure that it looks the way I want it to look and everything. But this is, I think it really inspired me what you said now to kind of just try different ways and possibly try, for each performance, try a new way of doing it.
Doing the same thing. Exactly. Yeah. I'm quite the opposite from you. For me, everything is open-ended. Okay. Like literally, if you ask me how many repetitions, I'm like, I don't know. I'll have to ask me. And then if Ranjani is singing, she knows
a certain level you've reached a certain level of panditya which allows you to do that. Like me, I still
no, I think I'm just lazy. No, I don't. I was always like this. I was like, for me, it was too much baggage to remember first and second and third and like, it's too much to remember. I cannot. I will remember the concept and I'll go do it. That's it. I can't.
That's such a learning. These I think that you pointed out, the way you structured the letter for, completeness to the whole piece. And this, this open-ended thing, they're quite different concepts, and how each piece gets its own treatment is it's so different,
Yes, exactly. And the lyric gives it to you. That's it. You just have to be open. I just read it a few times and then take from it. So then so the metaphor doesn't have to exist in the lyric. It can exist in what you do. What you're doing is metaphorical, right? So, so things like that, it's
Well, I think what I've noticed is what I've noticed from what you're saying is it's always the lyrics that sort of leads you, the sahityam that leads you, and it's about how much you read it or how much of your otherwise reading, not just the reading of this sahitya, but your general reading, the general kind of openness that you have to concept, which sort of reflects in your choice of how to approach this sahitya. So that's
absolutely.
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 So absolutely. I think we can just go on with examples.
But I'll stop here. We'll go to the next question.
Which you pretty much addressed in as we spoke about the previous padam, which is this, that a lot of material that we use from the past is most of our compositions are from the past, 17th century or even much earlier. So the cultural practices that existed then are not really, relevant or existent today, or probably not even understandable for a lot of us. So when we are taking on sahitya from another era, how do we approach it with better sensitivity while not letting go of the composer's ethos? This was my question, which you very briefly answered while we spoke about this, but if you want to elaborate about it.
Yeah, sure. I mean, like you said, I did touch upon it, and the way I look at it, I'm also born and raised like in the 1900s, and but when I look at sahitya, then I go through the same question process. Okay, I don't know, this girl doesn't make sense, or this doesn't, and that is with that kind of questioning or with that kind of wanting to know more, you start delving deeper. Like even a simple story like Vamanavataram or Mahabharata, anything, what is that story? I don't know what that story is. But once you start delving deeper, it unfolds itself to you. So you have to delve deeper to find out, okay, what is it that, all this is even saying. I mean, I can only refer to Shanta Shabjit's book, okay? Like if you've seen the book, the title of the book itself is Indian Dance, the Ultimate Metaphor. The dance itself is an ultimate metaphor. Our Aramandi itself is the ultimate metaphor of Sat Chit Anandam. So what are we? So when we are dancing itself, something that is so deeply metaphoric, where does the question of relevance come in? Okay, so first that is my point. But then I agree, a lot of times, people don't want to, they want to question, especially when it comes to Naika Bhava, things like that. So I tend to look for Sahitya that speaks to me. Okay, so a lot of times, even if it doesn't directly speak to me, within my limited experience of life and art, okay, even if it directly doesn't speak to me in the exact same context, somewhere it does. For instance, let's take an example. Let's take a Parakiya Naika, for example. Okay, Moguduchi Pilachedu Poi Vattuna Sami Sahana Ragam Padam. We all know, very, very famous Padam, we all do it. Okay, what is she saying here? I'm married to one, but I'm in love with you, Venugopala. Okay, I'm married to somebody else, now I have to go. What is this? It can appear many ways. It can be scandalous, like, oh, she's cheating on him. You can look at it that way. And you can say, oh, this doesn't make sense. So, she should just dump him, whatever. The standard 21st century sort of women, the way we talk, right? Or I take a step back and say, wait, let me not dismiss this right off the bat. Is this a metaphor for something larger? Is the Padam itself a metaphor for something larger? For me, a Parakiya Naika spoke to me almost immediately because I was like, I am married, but there are so many times I want to do something, like say for instance, I want to dance, okay? To come out of my earthly responsibility of being a mother, a wife, or this, or that, a daughter, but not being able to practice, that itself is a situation where I'm torn apart like a Parakiya Naika.
So beautiful, yeah.
Right? Or anything, these just earth, marriage is what ultimately. So you just take that marriage concept itself out and say, what is marriage? Marriage is somewhat of a bondage or some kind of a binding, let's say, okay? It's an earthly, worldly binding, something to bind you. But if I have a spiritual path, can I be married? That is what Meera was constantly fighting. She wanted Krishna. She didn't want to be married. So no matter what happened, she didn't want to be in that earthly bondage. She said, I only want union with you, Krishna. So the minute you start, so then there you go. You've already come to the mystical level from the metaphorical. That's it. There is no need to traverse it anymore. So the Padam itself, the whole concept of this girl saying, Moguduchi Pilachedu Poi Vattuna Sami itself becomes a metaphor.
So nice. So beautiful. So it's no longer just
it's no longer yeah, right, exactly. So contextualize it the way it works for you, the way you find it, yes, the way you see it, and each one of us sees it differently based on our experiences, right? And maybe I tend to be a little more philosophical, but that's just my approach, and I like it that way because I want to go to the deepest of everything. So, okay, so relevance.
It's also right that you said that we all question, and we find what works for us. But I think it's also the intent of the questioning. The moment it's a very cynical intent, we don't get anywhere. If it's just about, why should I do this? It doesn't make any sense in this era anymore. Then it's a very cynical approach which doesn't get anybody anywhere. But
exactly.
If we look at something that works for us, because there's something in every bit of poetry that works for all of us. It is about tapping into that, as you said, that experience from your life, or just relating it in a way that works for you.
Exactly. And we have this tradition, okay? It's a treasure. And this tradition of Bharatanatyam, we can't dismiss the whole thing off, that we've been given it. It is a blessing we've been given it. And so how can we, so every time I do something, my first question is, am I being responsible to the way the art is going? Where the art is represented through this. It can be a 5-minute Pushpanjali, or it can be a 40-minute Varnam, or it can be a 10-minute Padam. My first responsibility is to where the art, how is the art being represented through this composition? Because it's not me over there. It's not you and I dancing all the time. It is the art has a flow of its journey from Bharata's time. We are just specks on that journey.
Correct.
Right? So
once we just, as you said, yes, absolutely.
That the art has its own, like, such a long journey. And who are we to tamper with its journey? We just offer what we can to continue being responsible to it. That's it. And the minute you keep that in context, everything falls in place. So you want to understand, why am I even choreographing? Like, why am I even doing this, in the sense? Right. Yeah. And your first answer... Sorry. No. Yeah. It's okay. I lost my chain of thought. Go ahead.
That's totally fine. No. So as I said, so that's about composer ethos, as you said. It's about probably picking into aspects of the Sahitya that work for us, and then kind of, delving deep. And I think it's a journey. It's not something that we figure out in one day. But taking off from that question, I also want to ask you something that's been, playing in my mind for long, which is about contemporary composers. Now, there are a lot of people who write in the present era. And from my observation, there are two tonalities of contemporary composers. Either a tonality that mirrors the past, so a typical finding Naika, finding Lady, or something that's more, again, profound, but again mirroring the tonality of the past. Or there is a tonality of a present sort of, maybe Naika, whatever, but a very present context. So when we as young dancers or choreographers approach such pieces from the present era, which could have either of the two tonalities, is it right to just look at what the poet has intended and choreograph it that way, or is it also okay to put in our bit of present day relevance? So for example, if it's the tonality of the past, so is it okay for me as a dancer to put in a present day context to it? Or if it is a tonality of the present, is it okay for me to go back to something that I feel would work? So how do we approach this, dichotomous thing? I'm not sure if I was clear.
Yeah, let me see if I understood it. I don't see a dichotomy. Okay, I see a composition for what it is. Like if it's something. Sorry, my phone is doing something right now. Sorry. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So. You're right. A lot of the modern day composers, kind of stick with very similar themes from the past, but not so much. Also, they have. In fact, I do a Padam, he's not so modern day composer, but he's not like a Kshetraya. He is in the early 19th century.
Okay.
That Padam, the Nayika has cheated, and she goes back to the Nayaka.
Okay.
The girl has cheated on him. It's usually Krishna cheating and coming to us, and we giving him left and right and sending him. Here the girl has cheated and she comes and asks for forgiveness. So that is again present day tonality. But it's beautiful in the way he's written it. So for me, that works. Right? But when, now let's take, let me take for example, again, say a modern composer like Balamurali Krishna. He's no more, but he's technically more of a modern day composer.
Or even Lal Gudi for that matter.
Lal Gudi, for instance, right. So if we take Balamurali sir's, Omkara Varnam, for instance, the Shanmukha Priya Varnam, it's all entirely on Om. Like when I first saw the Varnam, I was like, I don't know what to do with this. It didn't make, I was like, Om is so abstract. What do I do? Thankfully, he was alive and accessible then.
Yeah.
I just sat with him. I just literally barged into his house. I'm like, I am so and so. He just looked at me. Okay, so I'm like, sorry, but I want to talk to you. Yeah. So you just sit down. And when you talk to them, if they're current day composers and they're accessible, you understand their thought. And his thought was not current day at all. As in his thought was very profound about how he imagined that whole Omkara to be. Extremely profound. So you have to stay true to that intent.
The poet.
Exactly. The poet's intent at that point, right? What is his intent? And so there is no real right or wrong. You have artistic liberties you can take. Of course, I took some artistic liberties. You can take that. But there is no technically right or wrong as long as it is completely, his tonality or the context of that poem is relevant to you, or you make it relevant to you, even if it's not relevant right off the bat.
Right.
If you understand it in a way that makes sense to you, then you will automatically bring that his ethos or his intent out, his or her, whoever. My guru, in fact, Dhananjayan sir does this Neela Kantare Varum. I don't know if you've seen it. It's all about pollution, and it's all about pollution. So he says, Shivan, you came at that time when there was this, whatever, the churning was happening, and Angani, you had poison, but look at the poison today we have. Why don't you come today and please drink this poison?
Nice.
Beautiful. Like the way sir does it, no? It's so beautiful. So again, and she was a contemporary composer. He spoke to her, understood her intent. And that is the way he represented it. Like, he showed pollution, the way we are polluting the world, and just all of that. Yeah. So
I think, like you said, I think integrity to the composition and the composer's intent comes first, and then we take our artistic liberty. But even our artistic liberty can, whether it can be present, it can be a past tonality, it can be anything. It'll
be a combination. It'll be your personal signature that's always reflecting through how you do it, regardless. And it just depends on your ethos ultimately. Exactly. And that personal ethos will just come through regardless. It's just underlying. It's there.
Correct.
Yeah.
That's a note to all young dancers, that we have to also look, we have to primarily say true to the composer's intent. I think that's something we should think about.
Yeah.
And also, this is one thing I wanted to ask you, especially because you're so research oriented in your approach to choreography. Now, often research can tend to be at a very intellectual plane. It is, because that's where you're grappling at facts and data and probably something very intellectual. And then there is a plane that sort of allows you to communicate that to the audience. I think we were talking about this when we did
right.
So how is it possible? What is there a formula, or is there any way that we dancers can sort of use our research, use all the pointers from our research, but be able to transmit it to the audience in a way that's understandable? So, that plane of from intellectual to the accessible, I would say.
Yeah. That is a very personal journey. Like, you have to, it can't be taught. It's very hard to teach it unless you understand it. Okay. So it's one of those things where I research. I'm just a geek, or you can call me a geek or a nerd, whatever. I'm one of those people. I love to research just for no reason. Okay. So but the minute you process it in the, sort of your analytical side of your brain, unless you sort of shift it and take it to the more creative side and experience it, okay, it's not going to come out. It will always look very intellectual. It will look so intellectual, so out there, where it doesn't even make any sense. It'll look like she's doing hands, like that Saveri. I could have done the same thing. Be like, oh, what is happiness? Oh, I'm supposed to get something external. Oh, I get external, but I'm not happy. You see how fake it looks. It doesn't come through from a lived experience of it. Or maybe, okay, I go looking for you. Oh, it's an inward journey. Yeah, I find you. No, you don't find her like that. So I'm just taking it back to that example. So one thing is, reading as a, just to put it as let me give you a corporate example. Okay. I know, maybe, I don't know if all the viewers are in corporate world, but if you are, there is one thing you study in college. Okay. I may have learned, how to code in C in college, or I may have learned how to code, but when I'm working, unless I actually apply that knowledge and code continuously every day in C and create programs, and then, work on, a Linux platform or whatever, it may be, I am not going to make that connect between the two.
Correct. Absolutely.
So I look at it that way.
Your knowledge.
Application. There is and when it's an artistic application, it happens in the creative side of your brain, and it has to happen there. You have to process it emotionally. Only then you can convey it.
Yeah. Okay. So emotional processing is probably the word. That
emotional processing. Exactly. Yeah. You have to. That's a definite. That's a must. If that doesn't happen, it's just going to look like very plastic and very pretty. The beautiful looking dancer who has a very beautiful
just like it's a documentary or something, which is a lot.
Yes, exactly, with a lot of pointers. Yes, exactly.
Right.
Yes.
Okay, so I have one last question, and then we'll open it out. So the audience, please do have your questions ready. So my last question to you is about this. You are known to kind of really source and produce lesser known, rare Varnam kritis and all of that. So, so for young dancers who are trying to do something different or trying to look at other things that are not really easily available, how do we source, interpret, access these? All these. So find, source, access, and interpret these. Yes.
I'll sum it up in one line. Where there is a will, there's always a way. I'm sorry, but it's true. It's like, if you really want it, if you want to find something, like, for me, it all started with like questioning what I was doing, just trying to understand, where is this coming from? What does this mean? Why does it mean a certain way? And, to keep going and looking further. And I'm like, and I know there's so much out there, there's so many books out there, there's so many compositions, millions and millions of compositions. Like, how do we, and maybe there is an avarice, in me that wants to get everything. I don't know. It's more of a geeky avarice, I would say. But, so it's like, you just hunt and you find, and, maybe Carnatic bookstore, Google is a great source. It is a great source. If you really know how to use it, I'm not talking about blog posts. I'm talking about, really serious articles and research papers. You will find a lot if you know how to use it the right way. And, but books wise, there is no dearth of books. Okay. There's this ton of books available. I buy books just because I feel like buying them. I buy all of, I have cupboard fulls of books just sitting between me and my mother. I don't know how many we have in this. And then in San Diego, another like 4 cupboard fulls of books. And I don't use all of them, but they're just there because I know I know something I can pick up from it at some point. Right. So it's just about going there and keep looking. And it's not that I go saying, oh, I want a new padam, let me start looking at books. Right. It's an organic process. It's part of who you are. You just, you read. So research isn't
part of yes. An avid reader, and then suddenly you stumble upon something and then you'll know it will work somewhere sometime.
Yeah. I think more importantly, can you be a lifelong learner? Can you be a lifelong student of life? Everything that life has to offer.
Right. And not just before a production that you need to
Not before a production. It's like, I got an idea. I'm going to make a production on pollution or what? And boom, I try to figure out. No, it's not going to work like that. It's a holistic, just like Sangati has such a beautiful holistic thought is what you're trying to convey. You have to lead your life like that, or it's not magically going to come one day. So
it's not going to come when you need it at that moment, as you said.
Yes, exactly. So there is no dearth of books. Carnatic Bookstore has all the books you need and more. Or come to me.
No, you get a lot of these as PDFs as well online. A lot of these books.
Yes, lot of them. Yes, lot of them are PDFs and Sanskritam books, especially that Sanskritam documents.org or something like that. There is And then there are libraries that are online. I think because of this whole coronavirus thing, there is so many libraries have opened up.
There, exactly.
Yeah, the New York Public Libraries, Asia Society, so many. And then they have some rare books, very rare books, beautiful books. You can look through them, see what works for you. How do you want to translate that into dance? And a lot of times it may not translate immediately. You may like so many things I would have read maybe 10, 15 years ago, but suddenly today I find myself applying it.
Come back. Right.
Yeah, you know, but it's just there. So just learn, just be open to learning. It'll all come. Yeah. And
It's a beautiful thought that you sort of summarized towards the end, which is be a lifelong learner, because I think learning is just, especially with something like Sahitya, right? It's so profound, so many languages, so many ways of communicating, so many layers within one word in one language. So how are we to even? I mean, I think a lifetime is not enough, but
not
for
enough.
as long as we live, I think it's so beautiful to want to just seek out that knowledge and just be a lifelong learner.
Right.
So on that thought, Akka, I have to say before I open the questions out, thank you so much for doing this for us. It's been
not at all. Entirely my pleasure.
Of, ocean, I mean, I know it's probably a drop in the ocean, but it's like an ocean of all that you said.
Thank you.
So much for all of us to take back. So I'm going to open comments now. So we have about 15 minutes. So if you have any questions, we'll take them, and then. And yes, as I said, this video will be available for 24 hours on Instagram stories. So please do, share it with all those you think should watch this, because I know for a fact that this is going to benefit everybody who watches it. So, yeah. So question time.
Thank you.
Yeah, but thanks, Akka. Really, thank you so
much. No,
not
at all. Just if it's beneficial, then I'm happy. Yeah, that's it. That's the goal. It's like
it's just. I think that's the idea also of Sangati. You initiate that thought, you put in that seed, and then that's where it all begins for us. I mean, I would have also not imagined these many ways of looking at that one word, or to look deeper into the word Saveriha, for example. Just speaking about it kind of, brings you so many more ideas. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly.
Have you ever used literature from other cultures in your works?
Have I used literature from other cultures? Not specifically literature. Thoughts, yes, but not literature. The language, for me, I think that's where I prefer Indian, mainly because of the musicality. I feel, Indian languages work better with the kind of musicality I like in dance. So I prefer to stay with Indian languages.
Speaking of musicality, is there something that you want to elaborate?
Oh, yes. Oh, no. That's an ocean. I forgot. Maybe we have to do it another time. I don't know. We can do it. Musicality, hugely important. I don't even know how much to stress and I don't know where to start about musicality. It's the soul of dance. That's at least the way I see it. Like for me, if I don't have the kind of music I envision in my head, I find it very difficult to move. It's very, very hard. It's just musical, unless every sangati, every note in the music, and the way the Sahitya sits with that sangati. For instance, the Saveri Varnam, since we're talking so much about it, it's Chittaswara, it's Mukta Swaram, if you see, it's loaded with Swaraksharams. Okay. You know what Swaraksharams are? When we have, my battery is running low. Okay. I just have to let it be, I guess, because, but anyway, so the Swaraksharams is when the Swara and then the Sahitya that corresponds to the Swara are the same. So, right. So then what happens, so when you see it, so even just understand, like the Saveri, for instance, beautiful Swaraksharams, unbelievable Swaraksharams in that. So just even appreciating. So when you're dancing, when you understand all these things that are part of what you're dancing from the music, it just changes the way you even approach it, because, and then it doesn't look disconnected. Like, okay, the musician is doing something on the side, the dancer is doing something on the side. It doesn't look like that, because you're connecting the two in your mind. And every instrument in the musical ensemble has to be in your mind. It's all one. We're all speaking one language. And that language is expression. It's not even dance or music.
Right.
And we are speaking one thought. We are speaking one word at every moment. We are speaking the same word. So you have to feel that connected with the music, or it looked and it's so easy. Like a lot of times I see, like when I know that the dancer hasn't understood the music, it's kind of very obvious. Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. So, okay. Yeah. So, Parimalaka, can you tell me which article you were mentioning? It is in my stories. You will find the article that Divyaka wrote in my stories. You can check that out. Have you worked with academics, that's researchers of dance studies, while trying to conceptualize?
Researchers of dance or researchers of poetry? I worked with a lot of dance. I mean, mostly the researchers are myself and my mother, and like somebody specifically.
Know, Aka's mother is Srimati Kanakam Devaguptapu, a very, very scholarly person and a very, she's a renowned musicologist as well. So, yeah.
So it's been mostly us, and my mother sometimes works with a few other Telugu scholars in case, she herself has some doubts. Right. But between the two of us, we try to figure out the literary part. But the rest of the research, I like to do 90% of it myself, unless I'm like really stumbling. I'll push myself till a point where, absolutely I have to give up and I need help. But the reason I want to just do everything, from start to finish is because then your understanding is very, very different. Very different. Because a lot of times somebody else's understanding comes in. It's nice to have another approach to it, another eye to it. But when you sort of work ground up, it's very different. So I prefer to do, yeah.
But when it's some other language that you're not familiar with, then in that case, you will probably be reaching.
Yes, I do. Yes. But mostly for the language, not for the interpretation. It's like the Saveri, I had to reach out to 2 people to figure it out. Right. But it was only because it was the Sanskritam, how best should I split it? But the interpretation, I was like, I wanted to find my way of doing it. Yeah.
So how do we know which source that we refer to is authentic to derive at choreographing a piece in the context of mythological stories? How do we know, which is an authentic source? Because there are multiple versions of a story, right? Yeah, that's true. There are multiple versions.
So see, every Purana itself says the same story in multiple ways. So, like suppose if we take what example shall we take? Manmadha, okay, the burning of Manmadha. The way it's given in Shiva Puranam is very different from Skanda Puranam, the endings. From, so there's so many different Puranas. I mean, I would always prefer to go back to a Puranam to read the story as opposed to Wikipedia. Wikipedia can give you some, overall, something. But if you really want the depth of the story, go to a Purana. And there are different versions depending on how every Purana has seen it. Envisions a particular story. Just the way we have so many versions of Ramayana, we have so many, every. So it's there. The differences are there.
It also becomes a matter of what is your choice.
What is your choice?
For you, yes. When there are multiple sources. Yeah.
Multiple sources, exactly.
Yeah. So someone asked. So you told us we must read. You wanted to say something, Akka?
Yeah, actually, is it okay if I take off my headphones because my charger and my headphones are in the same socket? Can I put the charger?
Yeah, it's okay.
Or no? It's okay?
That's fine. It's okay, I guess. We just have about 5 minutes anyway.
Okay, all right. Then it's fine. Then I'll just leave it as is.
Because it's, So you told us that we must read texts to know the actual intention of the poet. Could you please tell us which texts or books would have information about compositions like Padams and Varnams?
Okay, Varnams, there are many books, of course. There is, starting with Varna Sagaram, then there is my mother's book, Varna Varnanam, then every individual composer's book, T.K. Govindrao's book on every composer, for instance, Shyama Shastri or Dikshitar or Swati Tirunal compositions are part of those books. But again, they will give you overall meanings. So to really delve deep, you want to actually talk to somebody who knows it. Unless, for instance, maybe my mother's book, she split every word. I mean, she's literally given the whole thing in a golden platter and like, here, take it. All you have to do is dance to it. But there are some books, I mean, a lot of others don't split it so, to that extent. But you can so Varnams, these are the books. Padams, again, there are many books. You can, if you want something in English, there is Pappu Venugopal Rao's Fragrance of Padams, then Bunch of Javalis, but they don't have notations, they're only text. Then, if you want, then there is Rajnikanta Rao's book, Muvugopala Padavali, which is a Te Nakshetraya book. Then, notation, again, only some of them have. So like if you look at some of the more older scholars and musicologists who have written notation, Manchala Jagannatha Rao, but then again, they're not in English. So it depends on what language. If you can read Telugu, if you can read Tamil, then, you'll have a more variety of books that you can access. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So
the name of the book that Divyaka's mother has written is Varna Varnanam, Amridas.
Right.
Varna Varnanam by Srimati Kanakam Devaguptapu, and I think it's available online as well as in the store.
It's not online actually. I think some of those people, I don't even know who those people are selling online actually. Yeah, because we didn't sell it on, we didn't put it on.
Okay, yeah. Because when I was looking for it, I was trying to see if I can get it delivered here online, and then that's when I asked you if I can just ask you to hand it over to my friend when you came.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Online. It was there online, yeah.
Oh, never mind. Okay. I don't know. But yeah, it's then Carnatic Bookstore or we can ship it to you. One of the two. I can ship it. Yeah.
Anita Akka, thank you so much, Anita Akka, for joining. Okay. All right. So, if there are any more questions, we can take them. Otherwise, we can probably close this. But thank you all so much for joining. And thank you, Akka. I can't thank you enough for really expanding our minds beyond belief in just 2 hours. If you've done this, I can only imagine if we actually sit in this and delve deeper, what all we're going to come up with. So,
thank you for having me. Sorry if I took too long, but I don't know. There's so much to talk.
Thank you for your time. Thank you for your time.
Not at all. Not at all.
Thank you. The layers of Sahitya for us. And as I always say, everyone who's here, please do spread the word. Please do share it in your stories, wherever, because I would really want as many people to benefit from this session with Akka.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Yeah, thanks, Divya. Thanks a lot. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Akka. Thank you. Namaskaram and good night.